My name is Mabel Jean Duckworth. I am 63 years old. That day I sat on the veranda of the sanatorium, pretending to be a harmless old lady, and inside me something else was waking up. Something cold, collected, ready to hunt. My grandson thought he locked me in a cage. He didn't even realize that this cage was just an illusion, because many years ago my name was completely different. And yes, I can disappear and return when it's too late. This is not just a story about revenge. This is a story about how one woman decided to remind her loved ones that trust is paid not with words, but with actions. And if you violated the boundary, you will have to answer. For real. Subscribe to the channel, like, and write in the comments what you think. Is it worth forgiving betrayal? Or is it better to act harshly? The air smelled of rosemary and cypress, and something faintly tangible in the morning, as if an old secret had dissolved in a warm breeze. I sat on the wooden veranda of the Lake Breeze Sanatorium, in a white robe, holding a cup of chamomile tea. My fingers were shaking, not from old age, but from an unfamiliar calm. I was surrounded by perfectly trimmed bushes, an artificial silence behind which stood money and marketing. A young nurse, about 22 years old, with fingernails the color of cherry in blood, chatted cheerfully about how all old people need to unplug from their worries. I nodded, pretended to listen, but in my head I was turning over something completely different. My grandson, Emmett Langston, said this place was a gift. He said, "You deserve it." He said, "You were a grandmother and a mother and a best friend." He said, "Just rest, Granny. I'll take care of everything." He always had a way with words, too much so. It had been 3 days since I'd arrived. The staff treated me like a Ming-era ceramic vase. Don't drop me. Don't touch me too much. Warm water, soft sheets, dinner on time. And yet, I felt something was wrong. Not on the outside, on the inside. I've always had a good sense of smell, not just metaphorically. I can really smell when something's a lie. The air smelled like lavender, but my chest felt like burnt paper. On the 4th day, the phone rang. I was sitting in a chair by the window, reading an old book about fox hunting in Yorkshire, when the name Emmett flashed on my phone. My heart seemed to grind. From joy or anxiety, I don't know. "Granny." His voice was cheerful, as if he had won the lottery. "Guess who's getting married?" I froze. "Who?" "Me, in a week. She's just awesome. You'll definitely meet her." "Well, someday." I was silent. My voice became a little more cautious. "Yes, and, we needed money. A lot of things for the wedding, so I sold your house. I didn't understand right away, or didn't want to." "My what?" "The house. Well, the one where you lived. I drew up a power of attorney before you moved into the sanatorium, remember? You signed the papers, just in case, if something happened. Well, there you go. And I withdrew the rest from the accounts, all for a new life. You always said that family is the most important thing, right?" The cup cracked in my hands. The hot tea burned my palm, but I didn't feel any pain. "And you? Me? I'm happy, Granny. Everything worked out. Tina and I are going to Malibu soon. And you? Well, you're at Lake Breeze. You like it, right?" And he, without waiting for an answer, added cheerfully, as if it were the last toast at a farewell party, "Bye, Mommy. Not Granny. Mommy." And he hung up. The phone remained in my hand, like a thief's trophy. Everything around me continued to live its own life. The seagulls screamed outside the window. Someone cracked sunflower seeds down by the pool. The world didn't collapse. And inside me, everything froze. But it didn't break. I looked at my own hands, dry, veined, old, yes. But these are the same hands that held the radio station at the Syrian base. The same ones who picked up coded messages under fire. The same ones who once signed orders that could stop time. He didn't know who his grandmother was. He only knew the old woman in the dressing gown. And I just looked at the sky and thought, okay, let's play. The first hours after the call, I sat completely still, as if I really was the porcelain vase they took me for here. I was shaking, but not from horror. It was a shiver of recognition, a very ancient feeling that I hadn't felt for many years. In your youth, when you stand in a remote, deserted gorge, and the radio only picks up interference, and you know that the enemy is somewhere nearby, everything inside you freezes, except for one single thought. You are alone, and you need to survive. Now I felt exactly that. Only the enemy turned out to be my grandson. The nurse knocked on the door and brought pills and a glass of mineral water with ice. I smiled at her the way old actresses smile when they play dead women. Then I carefully closed the door behind her and took a box out of the suitcase. Small, leather, with a worn lock. It wasn't allowed on a plane, but I didn't fly. I came by train. Old habit. Leave no digital trace. No one at the sanatorium knew who I was, and why would they? Mabel Jean Duckworth, a sweet old lady from Arizona. All they needed. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a small satellite phone. I'd once taken it from a base in Okinawa in 1999. Old but working. With one single quick connect button. D, not home, not friend. But Joel Spencer was a legend, a former Pentagon hacker. He was known as Blind Dog because he smelled vulnerabilities rather than saw them. Now he worked outside the system, on his own. His services were free. He did what he thought was right, and I was like a godmother to him. I saved his ass in India when 12 men with machine guns and a warrant were coming after him. The line came on with a distinctive crackling sound. One long beep, then a second, a third, and a click. Silence, and only his voice, hoarse, as if coming through the laptop. Are you alive, old hag? I closed my eyes. His voice was like a key turning in a forgotten lock. Emmett stole everything. Sold my house, stole the money, getting married. In a week. I'm at Lake Breeze. Thinks he's locked Grandma in a cage. He didn't ask who Emmett was. He knew I didn't ask for help without a reason. He just didn't know how much deeper it went. Listen, do you want the house back? I want everything back. And let him feel what it's like to be alone, to be his own enemy. He exhaled. That exhalation was all I needed. Consent. Give me 3 days. Don't leave yet. I'll check him out. Accounts, assets, new documents, everything. If he issued a power of attorney for your house, it can be contested. But if he was at a notary and you don't have proof of incapacity, it will take time, so I'll do it differently, unofficially. I'm not asking you to return my property. What? I want him to be left with nothing, without even an explanation. He exhaled again, and this time he laughed, dully, quietly. He knew. It had begun. After the call, I went outside, walked through the garden where patients were doing breathing exercises. No one suspected that this grandma in the shade of the trees was already conducting a revenge operation. I felt something inside me returning, the old structure, the system, the strategy. In the evenings, I sat in the hall and watched TV, not because it was interesting. I watched the reflection in the screen. The security guard read comics every night by the glass doors. Nurse Rachel always forgot to lock the cabinet with the keys. The cameras on the 3rd floor were turned off during cleaning. I didn't need an escape. I needed independence. If anything, to leave without a trace. so that no one would know where I was going. Everything was falling into place. 2 days later, Joel contacted me again at 3 in the morning. The screen flickered and I picked up the phone. Found it. He bought a house in Austin. Luxurious, glass facade, basketball court, jacuzzi. All with your money. New car. Cadillac Escalade. He took almost everything out of your accounts and transferred it to a business card, invested in his fiancée's startup. All the real estate is in his name. What else? Her name? Her name is Tina Foster. Did 2 years in prison for credit card fraud. He doesn't seem to know. Or maybe he's head over heels in love. I nodded. Emmett was dumber than he looked. Or maybe he was just a kid. But it didn't matter anymore. I stood up, walked over to the mirror, and looked at myself. Tired eyes, wrinkles, gray hair. But there was something else behind that face. I pulled on an old camouflage windbreaker, pulled out my combat boots, and pulled my hair back into a tight bun. And for the first time in years, I looked at myself not as a victim, but as the Count Commander of the operation. And if Emmett thought it was all over after his call, he was wrong. It was just beginning. The Arizona air smelled different at dawn than it had at the sanatorium. No lavender, no rosemary, just dust, the warmth of hot sand, and the iron taste of an old road, as if the earth itself remembered a Ferris wheel that was no longer there. I walked out the side gate of the sanatorium wearing a nondescript gray jacket, holding a cane as a prop for those around me. I had glasses with slightly tinted lenses on my face, and in my pocket was a fake nurse's ID from a clinic in Phoenix, issued to a non-existent woman named Greta Thompson. I am Greta, and I am leaving. I got into the old Chevy Caprice that Joel had driven to the road outside the fence at night. He didn't call or text. He just left the keys under the sun visor and a piece of paper with the coordinates. Everything was the same. Behind the wheel, I remembered driving an armored personnel carrier in Afghanistan when they shouted on the radio, "Duckworth, go." And I thought, first left, then sharply right, and they will miss. Now everything was simpler. The enemy is not in the bushes. The enemy is a boy who wore pajamas with dinosaurs, who kissed my hand when he was sick. Now he wore Ralph Lauren shirts and signed documents to clean out my accounts. What he had become, I didn't know yet. But I would find out soon, very soon. The Jeep took me down the highway to the airport. Not the main one, no. To an old private strip where planes don't register with the federal system. From there, through Nevada, to Texas, Austin. There he was waiting, and they were waiting for answers. Emmett lived in a house that looked like the cover of Architectural Digest. White facade, glass walls, a backlit pool. On the outside, success. On the inside, betrayal wrapped in credit. I watched it all through a drone controlled by Joel. Sitting in an old motel on the outskirts, I drank black coffee from a paper cup and watched the screen where my grandson flashed by. He came out onto the terrace in his shorts, holding a glass of orange juice and talking on the phone. "Yes, baby, I put everything in." "Granny?" "Yes, I made out a power of attorney." "Well, I told her it was in case of an operation. Old people don't read anything." The voice was light, cheerful, even casual, and each phrase sounded like a gunshot. The house was gone in 2 days. Everything is in cash. Bank transfers through Evo Trust. Money for the wedding fund. "We want a wedding on the coast," he laughed, like a boy who found candy in the cupboard and ate it all while his mother was not looking. Johnny, that's what he called his personal chef, came out with a tray. I didn't even know that my grandson had a personal chef, apparently, at my expense. Tina, his fiancée, showed up later, slender, in sweatpants, with a face like a shark in a silk mask. She didn't kiss Emmett. She just held his chin as she spoke. manipulated. "Did you close the account with First West Capital?" she asked. "Yeah, sure. Transferred everything to Evo." "Great. We're opening a new one in my name tomorrow." I turned off the screen. Joel had already gathered everything: passwords, bank logs, statements, cash movements. I had it all on a flash drive shaped like a brooch that I pinned to the lapel of my jacket. Now I knew their weak spots. Tina had 2 arrests, one for check forgery, one for defrauding the elderly through a charity. Emmett had no business, no friends, just her, this house, and my money, vulnerable, defenseless, because they think they're playing with idiots. And I'm not an idiot. I'm a survivor. I arrived at the house at noon. The sun was in my eyes like a spotlight. I was wearing a simple black suit and glasses. I looked like a lawyer, or like someone with powers you're afraid of. They didn't open the door right away. Apparently they weren't expecting guests without envelopes and champagne. "Grandma." Emmett froze in the doorway. His face was as white as a leaf. How did you get here?" I didn't answer. I walked past him slowly, like a queen through ruins. I looked around the living room, the wide leather couch, the paintings, even the fireplace. My money, my life. Tina appeared from the kitchen. "Is this your grandma?" "Hello. Mabel?" I looked at her like she was some random insect. Then she looked at Emmett. "Have you heard the expression, scorched bridges?" He swallowed. Granny, I'll explain everything." "No need. You'll have time to think when it's all gone." "What?" "Everything," I smiled. "The bills, the car, the house, even her." He laughed, unsure. "Are you threatening me?" "No, boy, I'm warning you." And I walked out, leaving behind only the faint scent of perfume and silence. And in that silence, fear. It was like smoke, light, viscous, and inescapable. I knew that in a couple of hours he would realize that the bills were empty. In a day, that the house was foreclosed. And in a week, that there would be no wedding. But all that was later. And now I was just walking down Austin Street, under the old sun, and with every step I felt like I was giving back not money, but me. From the outside, Emmett's house looked like it would never go wrong. The clean lines of the facade, the glossy concrete, the trimmed bushes, the driveway with white lines, the sparkling pool reflecting the southern sun. It was as if everything that surrounded this house screamed, "Success lives here." But I knew, houses like this are often filled with lies and emptiness. He had built an illusion out of my past, taken my peace, my years, my work, my loneliness, and turned it into pool tiles and champagne in an ice bucket. In the morning, he came out into the street in a white shirt, holding the phone to his ear, giving orders to someone he called brother. He never had any brothers or friends, just contractors and lazy acquaintances with long names. Everything is fake, everything is temporary. He spoke on speakerphone, and I, sitting in the car nearby, heard every word. Yes, tomorrow I get a tranche, 50,000, through Tina's fund. She has everything formalized. Grandma's money is just a base. I will build everything. Yes, she is like in a sanatorium, feels like a queen, doesn't suspect anything. Ha! Funny, right? Funny, very. I even smiled. He went back into the house, and half an hour later a black Range Rover pulled up in the driveway. Tina got out, coffee in her hands, control in her eyes. She walked like someone who always steps on other people's weaknesses, like stones in a river, lightly, gracefully, without stumbling. She walked inside without looking back, and then the hustle and bustle began. 2 guys arrived, guys from an event planning company. I saw them through the drone. One was holding a tablet with the Infinity Events logo. The other was looking into the halls and taking photos. "We want white and gold," Tina said, "and an arch of orchids. Only real flowers. Everything has to be expensive. See that chandelier? It cost $18,000. We don't play cheap. Mabel is my future grandma, and if she ever shows up, she should be, well, happy. Grandma, happy." I hugged the steering wheel and felt something click in my chest. Not anger, not revenge, something much older. Silence, before the storm. Later that day, Emmett posted a story on Instagram. I watched it through a fake account run by Joel, a cute girl from Wisconsin who loves the luxury lifestyle. In the video, Emmett was standing by the pool, wearing sunglasses and holding a drink. "We're doing this," he said to the camera. "We're starting a new life. I'm grateful for everyone who supports us. Sometimes family isn't who gave birth to you, it's who understands you." He turned the camera to Tina, who kissed him on the cheek and showed him the ring. Love is trust. And if someone has ever sacrificed something for you, you just give it back, with interest. Right, honey? They laughed. The next day I returned to the house, but not alone. Joel was driving the rental car, wearing a baseball cap and a Hawaiian shirt. He looked like a tourist, but his face had the concentration of a surgeon about to operate. "It's all done." He handed me the tablet. "The accounts are empty. The house is under a fake lawsuit from a construction company for alleged debts. This will confuse the lawyers for a couple of weeks. They won't be able to sell the house or use it as collateral. We're quietly towing the car now. Only Tina is left. And her fund is frozen, under the pretext of an audit, through a contact at the SEC, but she doesn't know yet." I nodded. "And now?" I took out my phone. "Watch carefully." I recorded a voice message. "Hi, Emmett. It's me, Mommy. You know I've always been about the truth. But you've forgotten the most important thing. The truth isn't just a word. It's a tool. It can be soft. It can be like a bullet. You're going to wake up today and you won't recognize this world. Not because it's changed, but because you are nobody in it anymore." Joel hit send. A second later, the message was gone. "Will he get it?" he asked. "No," I said. "He'll get silence, and then nothing." 20 minutes later, security escorted the wedding planners out after a call from the legal department of the foundation that was supposedly funding the event. 40 minutes later, Emmett's car, his pride and joy, a black Escalade with the license plate EM777, was towed away. An hour later, Tina came out of the house with her phone screaming in her hand and her face full of rage. "What do you mean, assets frozen? Should I cancel the wedding?" She was screaming into the phone, but not into the house anymore. Into the car, then into the sky. And then she just screamed. And I was sitting in the car at the other end of the street, watching as the crystal ball of their perfect life gave its first crack. It would soon collapse. At first, he didn't believe it. He stood on the balcony of his glossy house, squinting at the phone screen, as if it showed not numbers, but a mirage. Account, empty. Refreshed the page. Pressed again. And again. 0. Down in the pool, pink petals swayed peacefully, the remains of a photo shoot for wedding invitations. It was amazing how quickly they began to wilt. Almost immediately after Tina found out that her accounts were frozen. "You did it. You promised that the money was under control." "I don't know what's going on, Tina." She was pacing around the kitchen barefoot, with an iPad in one hand and a phone in the other, like a shark out of water. Her skin turned white, her lips pressed together, Her beautiful face suddenly became sharp as a blade. "You're a pauper in an expensive suit. I invested my chances in you." "You invested my money," he shouted and froze from his own frankness. Tina looked at him as if it wasn't a man standing in front of her, but a mistake, a calculated, irrevocable mistake. She left 10 minutes later, without screaming, without hysteria, without hugging goodbye. She just walked out, clicking the car door. The Range Rover was bought with my money, so it stayed, leaving him with only the sound of his own footsteps and an empty house. I watched from afar, through a drone hovering over the block, a silent observer. Joel brought up the image on my tablet, sitting next to me on a bench in the city park. We ate ice cream because it was hot, and because it felt especially right to destroy someone else's lies with vanilla and pistachio. "He'll try to call," Joel said. "He's called the bank 3 times, the law firm 4 times. His name is off all power of attorney registers. All assets have been placed in a legal hold zone. The money is in a dummy trust account controlled not by you personally, but by a third party." "Who is that party?" He nodded at me, smiling. "A woman who eats pistachio ice cream and still wears combat boots." The next morning, Emmett was sitting in his living room. The walls that had seemed luxurious yesterday now weighed down like concrete. The mirrors reflected emptiness instead of confidence, and the furniture was too expensive for a man with no address. He tried turning on the music. Silence. He tried calling a personal chef. The number was blocked. The taxi app wasn't working. The card was rejected. His Alexa home assistant gave him the weather forecast and quietly fell silent. Even she knew it was over. He left the house in the evening, for the first time without glasses, without a shirt, without answers. He went out and sat on the steps, holding an old phone in his hand, the same one where I had once recorded my voice, and he turned it on. "Hi, Emmett. It's me, Mommy. You know I've always been for the truth." He listened to the end, then again, then a third time. When the recording ended, he sat staring at the spot where the pigeons were fighting over crumbs near the fence. Somewhere inside, everything that had been built on lies collapsed, without a sound, only sediment, like after an earthquake, when it's too late to save anything. Later that night, I went there again, not to the house, to him. He no longer looked like the boy who dreamed of building an empire. He looked like a man who realized he had won everything and lost the most important thing: self-respect and support. I approached slowly. He was sitting on the hood of the car, alone, under the streetlight that flickered like a forgotten signal lamp in the night. "You came," he said without looking. "I see you heard after all. Did you plan all this?" I didn't answer. I just sat down next to him. A pause. Then he raised his head. There were no tears in his eyes. Emptiness. "Why?" I turned to him. I looked straight at him. "Because you thought love was a piece of paper with a signature, and I thought you were family." He lowered his head. "What should I do now?" I stood up. "What everyone does who has lost everything. Live, only now, with memory. It is more accurate than any sentence." I left a small envelope on the hood. Inside were a few bills, the address of a flophouse, and a lawyer's business card, and I walked away. He didn't know that the card was fake, like the address, and that the bills were the last thing he would see of this life. But he would find out. Very soon. He woke up because it wasn't the phone, or the music, or Tina's voice that woke him up, but the hum of silence. Real, damp, sticky, like cold water on skin. Silence. There was no longer the usual fermentation of sounds at home, the slamming of doors, the sound of water, the creaking of parquet. No smell of coffee, not even the feeling that this was his space. There was only him, in the void. Documents were scattered on the floor. Bills, wedding invitations, paper flower patterns, guest lists. The plastic card lay nearby, like a discarded ticket for a train that had left. He tried to insert it into his laptop. Rejected. He tried on the phone. Blocked. He dialed Johnny, the cook. The subscriber was unavailable. He called the wedding planning agency. The number was excluded from the client database. He called Tina. The subscriber is out of service. He did not know that she was already on the other side of the country, flying on the first flight to Miami, without him, with a phone that she bought with cash and a new Instagram account where she was already flirting with a DJ from the hotel. Everything was gone. Emmett was sitting in his own kitchen, where the marble countertops were cold against his elbows, and the refrigerator was notifying that the food had spoiled. The TV screen still showed the intro of the wedding video. Emmy and Tina, forever begins here. He pressed the remote. It did not work. Even the remote control didn't work anymore. I watched from the house across the street. Joel had installed a hidden camera through the thermal window of his smart home. A glass wall is a beautiful solution for magazines. A disaster is when you have no more secrets. Emmett wandered around like a child in a house where an adult had died. He wasn't angry. The anger was gone. What remained was guilt. Not towards me, but towards himself. I saw him walk up to the mirror in the hall. He looked and turned away, as if he didn't recognize me. There he was, the boy who did everything for the family, who once kissed my palm saying, "You are the most reliable part of my life," who then turned it into an asset. Now, I had it all back. 2 days later, he was kicked out. The house he bought on paper turned out to be registered to a legal entity created through a shell company. My money was in circulation. The lawyer explained to him, "You are not the sole owner." He tried to object, but the papers he signed on the power of attorney contained a cleverly inserted amendment, which, of course, he did not know about. He left the house with one backpack. Expensive, leather, but absolutely pointless. Inside, a couple of T-shirts, a toothbrush, a passport, some cash, just not his own. Joel got it with the help of a third party. It was his money, real, the one he was counting on to start a life. Now it was mine. He rented a room in a cheap motel where the walls smelled of mold and the neighbor smoked weed from morning to night. He was trying to find a job. Not in his specialty, just a job. Nobody took his resume seriously. Nobody believed in a business consultant who couldn't explain what he'd been doing for the past 3 years. He slept in his clothes, ate noodles from a packet, and turned off the lights so he wouldn't see his own shadow on the wall. At some point, he went outside in search of someone from his old life. He called a friend from college. He answered coldly, "I heard you did something bad. Don't call here anymore." Even the streets were indifferent to him. Everything turned gray. One morning, he went out and saw an old woman near the motel. She was feeding pigeons, sat down on a bench, and opened a book. Me. He didn't come up to him. He just froze. His eyes were tired, but not angry. He understood. I won't take a step forward. Because he had already gone where there was no way back. Because trust is a bridge, and he burned it. I just looked up, met his gaze. No pity, no revenge, just a core reminder. That everything is a choice, and he made his. He lowered his head, turned around, and left. And I sat in the sunny morning reading a book, and felt how quiet it became behind me again. For real. Not because someone left, but because I regained my peace. The morning was especially bright, as if someone had turned up the sun in the settings of life. The air in Austin was not the same anymore, not sticky, not heavy. It had become cool, as if something in it had thawed. I was sitting on the bench in the park again, across the street from the cheap motel where Emmett now lived. I was wearing a simple gray sweater, jeans, and flat shoes. My hair was pulled back into a neat bun. I looked like an old woman with a book in her hands. Hundreds of them pass by. But I am not like that. There was no text in my book, only photographs, black and white pictures from the time when I was still called by my call sign, Owl. In one, I am in uniform, standing by a helicopter, my hair cut short, my eyes cold. In another, with Joel, both covered in dust and body armor in Kabul. In the third, a younger version of me, and a very young Emmett, about 6 years old, kneeling, holding a candy in his hand and smiling wide-eyed. A lot has changed since then, almost everything. He walked out of the motel, hunched over, stooped, his beard unshaven, his eyes puffy. He wanders like a man who has been squeezed out. He did not see me, not right away, but I saw everything. He stopped and looked at the window of the store across the street. Inside was a mannequin in a wedding dress, white, with sequins, with a long train. He looked for a long time, as if he hoped that the mannequin would turn around and say, "It was just a misunderstanding, Emmett. Everything can be taken back." But the mannequin did not move. He leaned against a lamppost and lowered his head. His shoulders shook. Tears? Or just a chill from his own worthlessness? I stood up and came up to him from behind. He felt it, without even turning around. "Do you think this is the end?" I said quietly, almost tenderly. He turned slowly. His face was sunken. His gaze was flushed. "I understand everything. You won," he squeezed out. "You have everything. I have nothing." I looked at him carefully. "You still have a memory. It's more than it seems. And this is your execution." He nodded heavily, like a man who understands his role in his own tragedy. "Please, at least tell me why you left me that envelope." "Because I wanted to give you an illusion," I answered calmly. "An illusion that you are still worthy of help, so that you yourself would reach the bottom and realize nobody is coming to save you. You thought I left you a life preserver, but I left you a mirror. You just didn't understand the difference." He exhaled. He sat down on the curb. You won't forgive me, right?" I sat down next to him. I looked straight ahead. Doves circled in the sky. Children laughed in the distance. Someone played a guitar to an old country tune. "I'm sorry, Emmett. I already buried you." "What?" I took a small case out of my pocket. I opened it. Inside was a death note, neatly folded with a seal. "What is this?" "This is your death certificate," I whispered. "Legally, you disappeared yesterday. Joel did everything. A new owner of your identity, and a new person with your face has already entered Canada." He turned pale. "Is this a joke?" "No. Your credit history is wiped. Your name is deleted from the database. You are now a non-entity. No bank will open an account for you. No company will hire you. You don't exist." He tried to get up. "You can't." I stood up. "I can. I learned to do it in countries where a human life was worth less than a pack of cigarettes. And if you think I wasted my revenge on taking money, you're wrong, Emmett. I took away your identity. You're a shadow now." He stood there, unsteady, like a man with only ashes in his chest. "What am I supposed to do now? Live the way you know how, or die? I don't care." I turned away, slowly walked away, leaving him standing on the dusty street, under the sun shining straight into his eyes. Somewhere behind me he began to scream. muffled, wordless, screaming like an animal locked in a cage he built himself. I didn't turn around. I just walked out of the frame of his life. He won't see me again, and no one will remember who he was, because now he is nobody, and I even took that name from him. The sun rose, especially brightly, not hot, not oppressive, but simply bright. I sat on a bench in the park, as if those days, those calls, those decisions had never happened. In my hands was a book with photographs of the past. The world went on as usual. Cars drove. People hurried. Someone laughed. Someone cried somewhere around the corner. Life went on. Sometimes we think that revenge is a way to restore justice. But in reality, true revenge is when you remain yourself even after everything that was done to you. When you don't lose yourself. When you don't become like them. Emmett chose the path that seemed right to him. He made a mistake. And now he will learn to live with it. And I just reminded myself who I was, who I remained, a person, even with sharp edges. Life is not always soft. It throws us into situations where we have to choose between surviving and remaining ourselves. Sometimes it's almost impossible, but it's important to remember, even in the darkest moments, we ourselves decide what light we will bring from them. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. New stories will appear here about ordinary people who experienced betrayal, loss, pain, and still moved forward. Stories about those who remained human even when the world tried to break them. Write in the comments, what is more important to you? Protecting yourself or preserving good memories of people? Maybe you've experienced something similar? Subscribe. There will be much more worth hearing here.